Dear colleagues and EIF members, dear speakers, thank you for joining us this afternoon to discuss the outcome of the second TTC summit that finalized, as you know, yesterday. The launch of the EU-US Trade and Technology Council on 29 September in Pittsburgh was, I must say, a groundbreaking step in helping achieve a common vision and establishing effective and innovative transatlantic tech policy. As the EU-US joint statement highlights, the world has changed dramatically since the first TTC meeting. The war in Ukraine has, however, also shown the importance of this transatlantic cooperation instrument in challenging times. In this new context, the TTC has been indispensable for fostering the unprecedented level of cooperation on export controls and sanctions. And in addition, it's being instrumental in reinforcing the transatlantic support to the declaration of the future of the Internet and in translating its principles on universal access, openness, and fair competition into practice. On a more pragmatic approach, I believe the outcome of this TTC session shows that the EU-US cooperation has been reinforced in critical areas for our growth and competitiveness, such as semiconductors, security of data flows, investment, R&D, industry-led mutual standards recognition, and artificial intelligence, among others. Some of the more tangible examples of these reinforcements, in my opinion, are one, the creation of the artificial intelligence subgroup that will develop a joint roadmap towards a trustworthy AI and a common project of privacy-enhancing technologies. Second, the creation of an EU-US as well strategic standardization information mechanism that will certainly contribute to promoting and defending common interests in international standards on emerging technologies. And third, the commitment to develop a common analytical framework for identifying foreign information manipulation. All these outcomes are indeed proof of how the TTC is maturing into a solid transatlantic cooperation mechanism. The Working Group 5 on data governance has announced that they will advance modalities for data access for researchers to enable online platforms to grant such access. However, we must have a much more ambitious horizon. I believe it is of utmost importance, I must say, to design a common transatlantic data space. In that sense, it is imperative to move up a gear on discussing diverging views on data governance and promote regulatory convergence that will facilitate free flow data and for personal data advance on a new privacy shield. Ever closer transatlantic cooperation on data will bring substantial economic benefits, set global standards, and retain technological leadership. And now, before pass the floor to my colleague Mia Petra Kumpula, which is co-chairing with me this event, let me just make a brief introduction, names and main duties only of the very interesting panel we had with us. Thibaut Kleiner, Director for Policy Strategy and Outreach, DG Connect, is the DG in which he deserves his duties. Jason Oxman, CEO and President, Information Technology Industry Council, ITI. Julia Jasinska, Head of International Relations at Nokia. And finally, Liam Benham, Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs, IBM. I have to, well, I am really happy with the panel we have today. The topic, the issue we are going to deal with deserve the best, and you are really the best for that. So, Mia Petra, the floor is yours now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pilar, the chair. I'm very happy to be here and then hear the fresh reflections of the 2 days meeting in Paris. And I'm very happy to go to Paris next week with my colleagues from the Congress. There will be hopefully 8 congressmen and 7 MEPs as we have this transatlantic legislative dialogue. Many other topics as well, the geopolitical issues, but also the follow-up on TTC, because I personally think it's very, very important that it's not only administration level cooperation, but strong support from the politicians and parliamentarians on each side. So what the result is that reaffirmed cooperation, it is good news. We need it a lot. There is a natural reasons that more eyes from Europe look now to West as the Russian operation, the war on our continent against Ukraine has changed so many issues that were already dealt before. So how you develop trade among the friends, how do you steer the technology of the future? It is the question of trust. And coming from Finland, which is the bordering country with Russia, we lost a lot of trust for the big neighbor. And there has been even the vote on the NATO membership today in the Finnish parliament, 8 votes against out of 200. So it's really changed rapidly, the political trust. There are issues we cannot influence ourselves, like pandemia, like maybe stocking a ship in a canal. So this is also increasing the unsecure feelings of the supply chains. So we need to look where the trusted ways to build it. And I think the companies will do a lot themselves to be more secure on their production times and capacities, possibilities. But there is also need for the more closely working together with the like-minded countries. So that is not the only cooperation European Union is having, but it is, of course, the very important one, being another big democracy we have across the transatlantic and many things that needs to be discussed and cooperated. Yes, it is not the new TTP or TTIP, but it is preventing new issues to become on the table. That is how I try to describe it. And I really much hope that when there are new technological innovations that are based on the values that we do share, and based on the goals like the climate we share, that there wouldn't be ever trade fights how to get latest technology on the climate, for example, on the markets on both sides, or revolutionary health issue solving. So let me put this more politically, that what we want to aim, there should not be difficulties, but the free trade and free possibilities for both sides. So this is where I look the results, and unfortunately I'm also together with the Pilar, we are members of the ITRE committee, but I'm also the INTA, working in the INTA, and at this moment in INTA they are having the reporting back from the TTC, so we didn't know when we were organizing this time, so I will not have this much insights, but I will happily listen to your ideas. So I don't need to go through the list again as the chair did, but then I think what has also changed the attitude that digitalization cannot happen without the physical goods. And that's why the CHIPS Act, the semiconductors, is a kind of reminder that you still need products and industry and supply chains. So not everything is on the data, even though we are starting the work on the Data Act together also with the chair. So we share many meetings nowadays. So also I think the cooperation is not taking away the autonomy, where we thought about the strategical autonomy in Europe, but it's actually increasing it, that you can cooperate more. You have the broader contacts globally where you can do. And then, of course, we are and I'm working also in the AI Act, but it is not the end, it is the start. We know that the development will be very fast, and we know that AI is also a tool that can lead the world, can steer the future, and we want to do it with the ideas that we have for the societies. So I think the future step of the relationships are still open, and we have the bright minds in the both sides of the bonds. Should we use more this increased academic exchange on the future technologies? I think that should be reminded. There has been tense exchange of academias and needs to be even more. So more substantial cooperation is developing metrics, methodologies to make sense of the risk posed by AI could be one way forward. And so the world is not ready, even the acts we have on the table at the moment. So I'm very happy to be here and listen to the stakeholders to how do you see the issue. Welcome on my behalf.
Well, this was a great introduction. So indeed, I'm happy to give you a bit of overview, fresh from Paris, so to say. Having been there myself the last few days, and also having been in Pittsburgh, I could also see a little bit where we are going. But first of all, it's really a pleasure to be with you. Also, physical presence is not something you can replace, and I think it's nice that in the EIF you do this increasingly. But also hello to people that join us in hybrid format, I would say. And today, I mean, I would just flag 3 points, if you agree, and then I'm really happy if we can have some questions. The first one is a little bit just really fresh from Paris. What are some of the takeaways? Second point I would make is a little bit TTC. Where are we in terms of the development since Pittsburgh? And maybe flag some of the deliverables, but also the next steps as far as I can see. So myself, indeed, in DG Connect, we are together with DG Trade actually coordinating the work on the Trade and Technology Council. 10 working group, it's a lot of work, I should say, a lot of coordination, but also a lot of human stories increasingly, because, and this was really one of the impression I got in Paris compared to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was maybe at some point a little bit more intimate because they didn't know, the principals didn't know each other so well. Now it was clear that they had already interacted. So it was not a fresh conversation, it was the continuation of a previous conversation. And they got down to business very easily because we had actually to change a bit the program. So we started with a strategic discussion also going forward, whereas in Pittsburgh, this was like the concluding session in the program. So that was really quite interesting to see that the principals mean business. They were very happy with the progress, but their word was also that, you know, they need to have some projects that are also tangible, that they can explain to constituencies and also to involve stakeholders in the process. Overall, I think it was a nice opportunity. May in Paris is always pleasant. And I think the French host, organized apparently a fantastic dinner in a chateau not far from Versailles. And I trust that the food and the wine were as expected. So this helped certainly also in the positive atmosphere between the principals. The Secretary of State had to leave to go to a funeral in the United Arab Emirates, but this didn't prevent the discussions to go on Monday. And we had also a fantastic opportunity to hear from the working group chairs, some of them connecting at 5 o'clock in the morning from the US, which shows a little bit the dedication to this project. But also in the afternoon, we had really a great discussion with stakeholders. A bit too many male on stage, but there were more ladies online at some point. It's still, I think, opportunities to have great questions and answers. And my take on the whole thing is that really, apart from, as usual, when there is US presence, you had a lot of police and military and surrounding, apparatus, but it was still very genuine, the exchanges, and very much candid. So we had, of course, scripted everything, but they didn't follow always the speaking points, which is a good sign of successful meetings. And at the same time, there was real groundwork in terms of the exchanges. So I think overall, not only a nice human interaction, but also I think very clear lessons from what has happened on the last 8 months, and also very clear indication as to where the leaders want to go next. And this involves actually stakeholders. This was also a clear message. So where are we, in fact, with the TCC in that respect? The way I describe it, and I see in the audience some people that are also participating in similar events where we look at the TTC, is that Pittsburgh was about basically a kind of getting back together, showing that the transatlantic relationship is really alive, and we move over the difficult period of the previous administration. But where we are now is, after 8 months, a situation where we can show we have built the foundations. They are indeed, through these 10 working groups, through the online platform we have established, through the contact with stakeholders and so on. TTC, I would say, is a brand today, and it's something we need maybe to more publicize, but it has a very concrete existence in terms of links, in terms of structural elements, and we could demonstrate the value of it because of, this helped in terms of the Russian aggression. Thanks to the TTC, we were able in no time to organize ourselves and coordinate sanctions. I think without TTC would not have been as rapid. You mentioned also a few of the deliverables in terms of these structural links around standardization, around disinformation, around issues like working together for the issues around platforms and the like. This protocol that was adopted also yesterday. So there are these structural links. There are these work plans that were adopted. So our statement is something like 48 pages, which shows that there is groundwork. But now where are we going? I think is really to deliver all that has been promised, but also make sure that we can make it also easier to grasp for the outside world a little bit, and make sure that we have a few elements, a few projects where we can say very clearly, okay, this is a TTC project, and we can mobilize also private sector, but also other stakeholders in delivering these projects. And looking forward, and that would be my third point, I mean, for the future, where are the areas that came out of Paris where the leaders saw most potential? So first of all, indeed, there were a lot of elements that came out and where they said we need to do more. An interesting discussion was about legislation. And I think, Mia Petra, you said it. From our side, we were very clear. The TTC is not there to interfere in our legislative process. We have Parliament, we have Council who are in charge of legislation, so this is where it's happening. But this doesn't mean that we should not speak to each other. And in fact, increasingly, I believe that the TTC is instrumental in making sure that we explain to our American colleagues what is the aim of our legislation. Because what we see is that actually, and this is really nice with the Biden administration, they're also listening to our experience. They're also looking at what we do, and sometimes we have shown also yesterday that we share the same principles. So I think these common principles, this alliance against Russia is really, again, a strong foundation, but it helps us also defending what we are trying to do in the legislation. And I think also for DSA, DMA, actually, the fact that we had a working group explaining to the Americans that this was not against US companies was very important, because they can see that actually, indeed, they can learn from this for their own system. And we share very often the same objectives from our legislation and their approach to these issues. So going forward, really, the projects can be not only around these common principles and how we implement them internationally. So there I would refer to getting more countries to sign this Declaration on the Future of the Internet. This was an achievement of the past weeks. We need more countries to sign up. We have 60 now, actually 59, because Senegal said maybe they needed a bit more time to reflect. So let's get them back on the list, but let's get more countries to sign this declaration. I think that's a task we highlighted. Similarly, a strong push was to say we need investments in developing countries, in connectivity, for instance, where EU and US can join force and support these investments. So here I'm looking also at you to say, where should it be? Where are the best countries we should focus to have these joint efforts? And that's something we need to deliver by October, so we have no time to waste. And the third element where really there was appetite for doing more is indeed around AI, where we have this commitment for a roadmap, and where actually, you know, the idea is to develop pilot projects on, you know, privacy-enhancing technologies, but also elements in terms of preparing standardization around AI, which is on both sides extremely important. So that's just a nutshell. There were more ideas, but I would just flag these three elements, in addition to indeed disinformation that you raised, which is something towards Russia that we need to get going. And the plan to have common methodologies there, I think, has a lot of potential. So we look forward to this collaboration. So in a nutshell, I think that Paris was, again, a turning point. We need to move one gear up to go to concrete projects. But I think that the huge work that was done between the administration, but also with stakeholders, is now starting to pay off, because we went from two administrations to, I think, a community around the TTC. And I think that's something we can develop further, thanks to the help of private companies, parliaments, lawmakers, and partners across the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Jason Oxman from ITI, the Global Tech Trade Association. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. I want to start off by thanking the terrific team, Maria Rosa, and your entire team at the forum for convening this important discussion, and our co-chairs and Madam MEP Pilar. Thank you so much for chairing this terrific event. And I want to start by recognizing the comment that Mia Petra made about how the EU and US relationship has never been stronger, inspired in large part by the actions of Russia in Ukraine. And I think it has brought together the transatlantic relationship that was already moving together over the last year or so, thanks a lot, as Thibault mentioned, to the formation of the TTC. But having common values between the EU and the US highlights the importance of the kind of discussions that took place in Paris this week. On the military side, of course, we know that, as Mia Petra mentioned, Finland's move into NATO is largely driven by Russia's actions. But I think on the tech policy side, it's an important reminder that as to the tech industry and a common regulatory approach across the Atlantic, it serves the needs of consumers in times of trouble. The technology industry brings people together through its products and services, and has done so for a very long time. It's interesting to note that the two companies you're about to hear from, although we think about the tech industry as new and exciting and novel, Nokia has been around for 150 years. IBM has been around for 110 years. Yeah, well, it used to be a paper mill, I guess, in Nokia. But the technology part made paper first and then started making phones, and IBM is known for technology. So these are companies that literally have been around for more than 100 years that are helping inform technology policy today. So I think it's important to remember there are a lot of great shiny objects in the tech industry, but ITI itself, as a trade association, has been around for 106 years. And we operate around the world. We are the TTC equivalent in the trade association world. We have an office here in Brussels that helps us with technology policy here, and an office in the United States. So I too am just back from Paris, just arrived in Brussels today, having had an opportunity, thanks to the TTC, to participate in the stakeholder discussions. So I wanted to echo Thibault's enthusiasm and optimism about the direction the TTC is moving in a number of important areas for the technology industry. First and foremost, just having the discussion, having the dialogue, recognizing that the idea of the EU moving forward in a different direction policy-wise than the US is not helpful to consumers on either side of the Atlantic. The EU and the US together represent 40% of the world's GDP. This is very close to a majority of the world economy. So aligning on policies and operating in an environment that recognizes and reinforces our shared values is enormously important. In the specific areas of discussion under the TTC, I think, as Thibault noted, a focus, and this is actually his working group that he runs, a focus on international standards, on technology standards, on unifying a standard approach not dictating from government what those standards should look like, but operating in a way that endorses, reinforces, and encourages voluntary industry standards is very important and allows us to ensure that technology operates to the benefit of consumers and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. It was also refreshing to see the focus on secure supply chains and making sure that the EU and the US, as Thibaut noted, are aligned on where there are sanctions that are necessary on those sanctions, but also making sure to ensure secure supply chains for the future. Investment in the CHIPS Act on both sides of the Atlantic, recognizing that this is not a race to impose financial benefits on either side of the Atlantic, but rather an opportunity to encourage manufacturing both in the US and in the EU at the same time. That alignment is important. We all know the importance of semiconductor manufacturing and the impact that a global shortage of semiconductors has had. So the CHIPS Act in both the EU and the US are both very important, and we're encouraged to see that move forward. Also, focusing on transatlantic exchange of data. Digital services are enormously important on both sides of the Atlantic. We certainly saw, although this is not officially a component of the TTC, it certainly came up in the stakeholder discussions, the replacement to Privacy Shield, the new framework that was agreed to by the EU and the US, that's in the process of being implemented via an executive order by the Biden administration in the US, and soon will come to the EU for ratification. Again, enormously important that we ensure the free flow of data. It generates more than $1 trillion in economic activity between the US and the EU, and having that settled and moved forward in the coming months will be enormously important as well. We also saw in the statement that came out from the TTC after the conclusion of yesterday's sessions, an emphasis on ensuring that other governments, even outside of the US and the EU, that move forward on policies that are harmful to global trade, that restrict access to data. Those are things that the EU and the US should unify in opposition to and make sure that the free flow of data, the free flow of goods and services is not interfered with by any countries that are looking to perhaps impose unilateral rules and regulations that may appear to be beneficial within that country but interfere with international trade. That was a great outcome as well. I also want to commend the TTC for including the stakeholder provision and making sure that input from industry is considered. We certainly heard that from the dais. As the 10 working groups under the TTC are moving forward, we know that they are involved in a variety of different activities and there's a lot of work. But taking the time to solicit and receive and incorporate input from industry is an enormously important component of the process. And as we move forward to the next TTC gathering, which will be in the US later this fall, that will continue to be an important element. And it's interesting to note, there's a lot of discussion about what the TTC has accomplished thus far. Remember, it's only 8 months old. So in 8 months, a lot has happened and a lot has been accomplished, but there's much more to be done. And we look forward to the opportunity to continue to support the important work of the TTC as we continue to support the important work that's happening in the Parliament on tech policy. And we look forward to being a part of that discussion as well. ITI, on behalf of its member companies, is dedicated to advocating for policies that promote innovation and promote technology. And we look forward to further discussions. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and look forward to your questions and further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here today. We had a lot of gloomy moments in the last couple of months, but today is a day to celebrate this partnership that takes us forward in a transatlantic level. And I'm very encouraged as an employee of a European company, as a European citizen, to see it moving forward. So I'm here as a representative of Nokia, and I have a subjective view on that, but I think it's an exemplary transatlantic digital champion, born out of merger of EU legacy. And thank you for presenting our history already, so I don't have to bore you with our legacy of starting at the banks of Nokian River. And then, but also the US legacy of Bell Labs, an innovation powerhouse. Together, it led us to a leadership position in networking technology across mobile, fixed optical, submarine cables, but also software and services associated to that. So I think we can be taken as an example what can be achieved if you take EU and US born assets. But okay, today I'm here to talk about TTC, not about us. So you are not surprised that Nokia is a great supporter of this collaboration, which was also expressed in an open letter, which was published a couple of days ago, signed along with a couple of companies, also IBM present here. It is very encouraging to see how both the EU and US governments see criticality of digitalization for our future, and that technology was picked as a topic for this collaboration. This matters. This matters for competitiveness of our economies and for sustainable future of our economies. This green aspect, my CEO tends to say, there is no green without digital. And I believe in that because this is the best shot we have to optimize, to save on waste, to optimize resources, and to advance towards our, in Europe, Green Deal goals. And this collaboration is future-oriented, which is also seen in mentions on 6G and beyond in the statements of yesterday. I have asks as well to policymakers. So first and foremost, that's a basic one, but we need to make sure that the EU and US markets are open for companies from both sides of the Atlantic. And that includes also public procurement and access to R&D support. And I've seen statements or declarations that barriers will be tackled and new distortions will be prevented. That's encouraging to hear. Now we want to see this in action. Second, recognizing that TTC does not replace separate regulations and legislations, but the goal here is to align as much as possible. So let's start with mutual risk assessment, especially assessing the risk of technologies, to have a common understanding what really needs to be regulated and what not, and to also consider, well, self-regulation of industry-driven initiatives could be suitable to achieve the goals that we are after. And finally, this is a bilateral setup, but the goals are actually to look outwards. It's about global focus. And a couple of examples where it matters. One can be in the area of standardization already mentioned. This is not about creating new transatlantic standards, but rather reinforcing global standardization. And this can be achieved if the industry leading role is preserved. It's about spreading the benefits of sustainable digitalization around the world and also having an offer to the global south. So super important, this task force that was created about helping with digitalization infrastructure projects for developing economies. And finally, this is also about reminding here about the fact that we already have multilateral institutions in several of the areas where working groups have been created. So to bring here the name of the Wassenaar Arrangement or a WTO as just a couple of examples where TTC can lay a groundwork to advance actually common agenda on a multilateral and global scale. And I will leave with a question, although we are not yet in a Q&A mode, but we will soon be. How does also this bilateral setup fits into other setups that we have? Because of course we also observe and we are very encouraged in equally positive progress in collaboration with Japan or a second TTC that was announced with India. On the US side, there is Quad and other formats as well. So it would be good to see at some point how all of those can fit together in a concerted manner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. May I commend all of you for being in a windowless room when the thermometer is hitting 30 degrees outside. So I commend your commitment to this discussion on the TTC. I'd like to thank the EIF for inviting me to speak. I'd also like to thank Pilar and Mia Petra for graciously chairing this meeting today. And as usual, the EIF has got the timing just right, because this is the day after the second ministerial on the TTC concluded in Saclay. And of course, the meeting was dominated by Ukraine and Russia, as perhaps was not surprising. I mean, the world has really been upended, I think, over the past 12 weeks by the unjustified and brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I think this reminds us that in this post-World War II order, what we used to take for granted, the rules-based system, the open economy, shared values, I think we can't take these for granted any longer, and we have to perhaps work a little bit harder on them. So I think it's been a wake-up call that the EU, the US, and like-minded partners really need to double down on what is important and perhaps put some of the old issues, some of the old niggles in the relationship behind us. And let's not forget about the pandemic. That kind of was pushed to the back a little bit by the invasion, but this also left some really deep scars in the relationship, in the global economy. Disrupted supply chains, soaring inflation, huge budget deficits. We're starting to see now some social unease around the world. Food prices and energy prices are spiking. We're even seeing some social deep unrest in parts of Southern Asia. And then, of course, we have climate change. So this is a really, really big agenda backdrop against which the TTC is making progress after its second meeting. Just if I could turn to the tangible deliverables, what we are looking for as a company from the TTC. I think we're looking for this process to drive technological innovation, of course, economic growth and job creation. I think all of our citizens also will be looking for that. But also, it's not just about the economics. It's about, I think, generating trust and resilience in the digital economy, and also finding solutions for things like the energy transition, because digital is going to have a huge role to play in issues such as that. And for that reason, IBM has been a huge supporter of this process since it was launched. And by the way, Jason, IBM is 115 years old, and we started off producing things like cheese slicers. So that tells you how much the company, because we're currently doing artificial intelligence, quantum computing, we have progressed over that 115 years. So concrete deliverables are really important from this process, and we don't underestimate the difficulty of finding those concrete deliverables. And I say that as somebody with the gray hairs and the hairline of somebody who's been involved in the transatlantic business dialogue, in the TEC, the Transatlantic Economic Cooperation process, and many of the activities around TTIP. You know, lots of acronyms beginning in T, some of them more successful than others, if we are to be diplomatic about it. So it's really important that this one delivers. What outcomes do we like from Saclay? Let me be very specific about two of them, which have already been referred to. We really welcome the TTC's clear focus on critical emerging technologies. For example, the creation of this artificial intelligence subgroup, which will deepen collaboration on how to develop and use trustworthy AI. That's really of significant note. Then there's also the creation of the EU-US SSI, the Strategic Standardized Information Mechanism. Now, to the layman, this might sound a little bit technical and dull. This is absolutely vital. If the EU and the US can come together and start to agree how they will go into international standards bodies to work together, that will be a key achievement from the TTC process. So these are great areas of cooperation so far. We've supported them. We'd like to see more, frankly, in terms of ensuring reciprocal access to procurement markets for emerging tech. We'd like to see more research collaboration in areas like quantum computing. And quantum computing will be one of the levers of our future global competitiveness. So we have every interest in working together on that. We'd also, in the current context, we should deepen export control cooperation. We should coordinate better on foreign investment screening. Again, these are areas when you share values, it should be possible to find common ground and to reach agreements on. And then, of course, there is supply chain resilience in the current context and cybersecurity. That goes without saying. Also, semiconductors, not just the supply chain and the production of semiconductors, but greater research collaboration to promote the next generation of semiconductors, which will be absolutely critical again to our future competitiveness. And this should not be an exclusive club. I mean, the EU and the US is a very large relationship, but bring in like-minded countries, my own country of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Japan. They should all be invited on board because I think they also share these values, and then it will really become a notable global achievement. So one other aspect of the TTC we like, it's discussions around platform issues and content moderation and disinformation, I think, are very important. I know there has been some minor dispute transatlantically about DSA and DMA. It was great to hear Thibaut talk about how TTC had been a forum for understanding on those issues. But I think, again, both sides of the Atlantic and policymakers around the world share similar objectives in terms of platform regulation and tackling disinformation. So there should really be more progress on that, and we're glad it's been flagged as a key issue within the TTC. Last and not least, let me just finish here. I think the TTC should uphold a couple of really core principles, and these are really absolutely fundamental to our business, and I think to many businesses. First, we need fair competition and open markets because these are shared values between the US and the EU. There should be reciprocal participation and openness in each other's markets, and I genuinely say that both ways. I think there are faults on both sides, frankly, and I think we need to get past those. We need to refrain from using domestic investments and innovation support policies to exclude each other from our domestic markets. You know, I guess when you're a policymaker, particularly at national level, there's a temptation when you're approached by your local economic interests to do that. I think that's really bad for the longer-term strategic picture. So here in the EU, let's have open strategic autonomy. That's a really good concept. But let's not push a mercantilist brand of digital sovereignty, which I think we do see more and more in some parts of the European Union. We really need to make sure that is addressed. And secondly, of course, and this has been mentioned, we need secure transatlantic data transfers because, frankly, without that, much of the activity in research and other work streams at the TTC would become irrelevant if you couldn't transfer data across the Atlantic. So thank you very much for listening to these observations from a small American tech company based in Armonk, New York, that used to make cheese slicers, and look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.